Morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to another Coding Every Day Until I Get a Job. This is day 78, and I think what I want to do today is to finalize some of the bug fixed and then probably input more data into the database and turn that into a seeding file. And let's just see how I can um, deploy them. Like how would I migrate the database and then just set up everything. But yeah, I think all the core functionality of the project is finished, and that we just need to have I need to deploy them because yeah, we should that's what I should be doing. Okay, 1 second. Let's turn on the Panda Beats music first, and then let's continue with the app. Yeah. Not a good way to start. The song starts to get boring. This song, at least. Like, maybe let's just try the other one. Okay. Let's just hope that we can get this right. Okay. I think there's still a bit more fix that I need to do regarding the like button, although it mostly fixed, but some edge cases where it wouldn't how would you say it, like it just wouldn't load, or this some of the state of the color of the button doesn't apply correctly. So let's try to adjust that and fix that. And yeah. Hello, good morning. That's or afternoon or evening or whatever it is you are at your time zone. Okay. So we need that, and then it's in the use like query function like resource ID session. Let's check. Turn files. Wait for each. Okay, this one is a bit of a TypeScript thing that I don't understand yet. Mhm. Toggle like resource ID on mutate. It runs an async. Await query client, cancel queries, query key like resource ID, and then another await query client, cancel queries. Wait, let me just, that's not what I want. Okay, so I will need to remove the const previous liked. I think we encountered this issue before. Why is it showing it like this again? Wait, yeah. Let me try to recheck it. See if that's how it is. Wait, yeah. Let me try to copy paste it and see. Oh, how would that work? Null. Okay, wait. Let me try to do it again.
हेलो व्हाट्सअप गाइस, टुडे इन दिस वीडियो वी विल सी हाउ टू सिक्योर योर VPS बिफोर होस्टिंग। जी हाँ गाइस, आज कल बहुत ही ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है एंड जिनके पास भी VPS सर्वर है फॉर देम इट्स लाइक अ मैंडेट।
Recently, I've been working on a brand new micro SaaS, and I've been having a lot of fun doing so. One thing that I've really appreciated is how easy it is to now deploy our applications to the cloud, with a huge number of platforms as a service making it easy to do so. Whilst these platforms can be pretty great, they're not always perfect. Because of the underlying business model, they're not well suited for long-running tasks, or transferring a lot of data. And doing so can sometimes result this, making it easy to do so. Whilst these platforms record and wait for it to propagate across the global DNS. Recently, I've been working on a brand new micro SaaS, and I've been having a lot of fun doing so. One thing that I've really appreciated is how easy it is to now deploy our applications to the cloud, with a huge number of platforms as a service making it easy to do so. Whilst these platforms can be pretty great, they're not always perfect. Because of the underlying business model, they're not well suited for long-running tasks, or transferring a lot of data, and doing so can sometimes result in an unexpectedly high bill. This contrasts to using something such as a VPS, which stands for a virtual private server. These often provide much more consistent billing, whilst also mitigating some of the caveats that comes from using a serverless platform. Despite these benefits, however, I've always been rather hesitant to use a raw VPS when it comes to deploying my production services. This hesitancy is due to the perceived difficulty of setting up a VPS to be production ready. But is that actually the case? Well, in order to find out, I decided to give myself a challenge. A challenge to see how difficult it would be to set up a production-ready VPS from scratch. As it turns out, it's actually a lot easier than I thought. To go along with this challenge, I've built a simple guestbook web app with the goal of having it deployed on a VPS. Before I went about deploying this, however, I decided to write out a list of requirements in order to define what production-ready meant. To kick off these requirements, I first wanted to make sure I had a DNS record pointing to the server, followed by making sure that I had the application up and running. Afterwards was adding good security practices to the box, such as making sure that all HTTP communication took place over TLS, and that the box itself would automatically provision and renew its certificates. As well as TLS, there would also need to be additional security measures in place, such as hardening OpenSSH to prevent unauthorized access, whilst also setting up a firewall to block any unnecessary ports. In addition to ensuring that the application was secure, I also wanted to make sure that the deployment had a good user experience. This meant setting up high availability, as much as you can on a single node. To do this, I would need to set up a load balancer so that I could distribute traffic across multiple instances in case one went down. As well as a good user experience, I also wanted to make sure I had a good developer experience. This meant setting up automated deployments, so that whenever I pushed up a change, it would automatically be deployed onto the VPS within a couple of minutes, all whilst keeping the service available. Lastly, I wanted to make sure that if the website did become unavailable at any point, I would be notified. This meant I would need to set up some sort of website monitoring. With my requirements defined, the next thing to do was to consider some of the technical approaches I could take. The first condition I had was that I wanted to achieve this using simple tooling that didn't require too much domain expertise. This ruled out using something such as a lightweight Kubernetes deployment, such as K3s or micro K8s. Additionally, I didn't want to use a full-featured solution, such as Coolify. Instead, focusing on setting this up without any additional layers of abstraction. This also meant I didn't want to use any infrastructure as code, such as Terraform, Pulumi, or OpenTofu, although I may consider migrating to one of these in the future. With my requirements and technical considerations defined, it was now time to start setting up my production environment, which meant I needed to obtain a VPS. Fortunately, that's where the sponsor of today's video comes in, Hostinger, who have kindly provided a VPS instance for me to use throughout this video.
Wait, sorry, I'm just gonna try to fix this again with the help of Gemini. There is some error apparently regarding the types in the server action of the like. So let's try to fix that before. Yeah. Server and then basically we still have some error in the use like hook, but the server action for the like also didn't return the number of that. That's why the yeah, the increment and the decrement of the like count are weird. So yeah, let's try to add that. Okay. Likes resource from DB schema require auth. We already have that, and count equal and count. Okay, we need count from drizzle rm and toggle like. Instead of export async function const session await require auth, try const existing like equal db dot query. Ah, okay, so the query is a bit of okay. Let's leave that. Oh, db dot query dot find first. Columns is id true where n property my first does not exist. Ah, sorry.
If you're considering getting a VPS for your own applications, then Hostinger has some amazingly affordable rates. In my case, I have an instance size of KVM2, which has 2 vCPUs and a whopping 8GB of memory, costing only $6.99 a month when you sign up for a 24-month contract. It also comes with up to 8TB of bandwidth a month. If you tried to transfer this much data on Vercel, it would end up costing you over $1,000. Not only this, but a VPS instance this size for $6.99 a month is incredibly affordable, especially when you compare it to other options. Additionally, when checking out, if you use my coupon code DREAMSOFCODE, then you'll receive a further discount on the already low price. So to get your own VPS instance today, make sure to check out the link in the description below and use my Dreams of Code coupon code in the Hostinger UI. The first thing to do was to choose operating systems with panels or applications. The application tab provides a number of pre-configured environments with specific commonly used applications already installed. These include Docker, Ollama, and even one for VS Code, if that's more your vibe. Whilst this is pretty cool to get started quickly, in my case, however, I wanted to install everything I needed from scratch. So I ended up going with a base operating system installation. As for which operating system, as much as I'd have loved to use Arch, by the way, instead I decided to use Ubuntu 24.04, which is an LTS or long-term support distribution, and perhaps one of the most common operating systems when it comes to setting up a VPS. On the next screen, I made sure to disable the Monarch's malware scanner, as I wanted my server to be as base as possible. Then it was time to set up a strong password for the root user, before adding in an SSH public key to allow me to log in over SSH. Hostinger does provide some instructions on how you can both generate and add a new SSH key. However, in my case, I decided to use my existing one, as it's tied to my YubiKey. This was done by first copying the public key to my clipboard using the following command, and then pasting it into the SSH key box. With everything set up, I went and deployed my new VPS instance, and waited for it to start before testing the login over SSH, which was working correctly. Whenever I log into a new VPS, the first thing I do is to always make sure to add a new user account, as working as the root user is generally not advised. Adding a new user account is done by using the add user command, followed by passing in the user's name. In my case, I set this to be Elliot. Upon doing so, it then prompted me to add the user's password and to fill out any additional information, before then creating the user. With my new user account, the next thing to do was to ensure that this user also had sudo permissions, so that I could elevate its access whenever I needed to. This was achieved by using the following usermod command, adding the user to the sudo group. Afterwards, I could then test that everything was working correctly by first switching to this new user using the su command, before running a test sudo command. With my user account added to the VPS, it was now time to move on to my first requirement, pointing a DNS record at the server. Surprisingly enough, I didn't have any spare domain names lying around, so I needed to purchase a new one. Fortunately, you can buy a domain name from Hostinger at an incredibly low price, so I decided to purchase the zenful.cloud domain name for the low price of $1.99 for the first year. Once the purchase went through, I then went about adding a DNS record pointing to the VPS, using the Hostinger UI. To do this, the first thing I did was clear both the existing A and C name records that were automatically generated, as they were no longer needed. Then I was able to add a new record for the root domain, pointing this to the IP address of my server, which you can pull out of the actual node itself by using the ipadder command. All that then remained was to save the record and wait for it to propagate across the global DNS network. This can take a few hours, so whilst I waited, I went about making myself a warm beverage before deciding to add some more security to the VPS. If you're following along at home, you may want to install Tmux on your VPS and work inside of it. By doing so, if your SSH connection happens to drop, you're able to easily reattach to the Tmux session when you SSH back in. In my case, I'm using Tmux on my local machine with a pretty reliable internet connection. But if SSH did drop, then this can be a little annoying. However, it didn't do so during the filming of this video, which took place over a couple of days. If you want to learn more about Tmux and how to use it, I actually have another video on it, which you can check out after this one. In order to...
Okay, I guess let's just try to do it. Hello, hello? Can you hear me? Hello, hello?
harden the VPS, the first thing
My audio or like the video audio? If it's me, I'm not talking much, sorry. But yeah. We don't have this, so TV, and then it is wait, what? Why is it an issue now? It was not an issue before. Once again, and oh, sorry, it's cons existing like equals to existing like equal. No more type error, right? Please, this works. Okay, let's. Yes, okay. Okay, sorry. I was confused, but hopefully it's much better now. Let's see how that will go. Let's see if the project is working now. Let's sign out and just use the I think I'm just gonna what's the best way? Oh, this could be Grok. And I think I want to populate the data and then extract that and make the, okay. That's I think we have some task and okay. If we go here and we want to light some resource, it would prompt a I think they're still compiling, yes. Okay, everything load faster, and if you want to click like, you need to sign in, and if you hit sign in, it will redirect to the sign in. We have a nice there, and let's go with the test. I think that's the password, and we can sign in. Welcome back. We're signed in. Check the dashboard and still building the dashboard. Okay, let's see if these, okay, the state of the color is still wrong. Why? Okay. Is it because it has the 5-minute cached? I think it's because it's the 5 minutes cache. That's why it's not optimistically updated it, even though. Okay. It's just that the state of the is liked is always a bit odd. I don't know why. It's supposed to be red, and it is liked, because if I press this, it's okay. This is not good. Okay. You know what? I think I'm just not gonna care about this. I'm just gonna keep it a bug. I think the cache first, these cards I think are cached. That's why there's still 3, but when we go here it's 2, and if we go to the dashboard it just doesn't show up. So that's why it's supposed to be became 2 now, but since it's cached, and if we reload this, it's gonna be 2. It's not optimistic that you see. Yeah, I think yeah, because you need to you know what? It doesn't matter. I think I'm fine with that. I don't mind that. Yeah, I don't mind that. You know, it's fine. Uh, I don't have admin privileges, but if you go here, it's yeah. I think we can make this work. It doesn't. Yeah, you know what? I think it's just yeah. Go to home. Go to dashboard. Go to home. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Not turn this data. Is there a way to make the local data be able to also transfer or like seed the later production PPX? Is that can I like turn those into like a seeding script or export them into JSON and then like have a script? Yeah, okay. This process involves exporting the data from your local data, importing into the production, or setting up a seeding mechanism for your Next.js project using Drizzle RM. Below, I'll provide a step-by-step guide to accomplish this, tailored to your setup. Cover to wisdom and creating a seed script for specific data. Export or import use Postgres, pgdem, and PSQL to export your local database and import it to your production VPS. Is data transferring all blah 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 blah. Create a Drizzle ORM seed script to populate specific tables with initial data. This is useful for controlled data initialization in production, default users or settings. Ensures compatibility between your local and production PostgreSQL version. Secure data transfer, blah, blah, blah. Mantap nih kalau nggak ada suaranya bro. Halo bang, ini lagi membaca sedikit. Mau seeding database yang di local ke buat yang di VPS. Tapi masih bingung apakah bisa. Check the production database. Okay. Seed only necessary data. Default admin users. I don't want to store the seed there. Okay. See for initial setup or migrating is data. Use seeding if you only need specific data and want a programmatic repeatable way to initialize the production database. Use pjoin to transfer the schema and a seed script for specific data. Okay. The thing is, if I remember correctly, then I need to change the. I need to set up. Okay. How would I set it up though? For the application to work, that means I need to run the. Oh, okay.
To do was to remove password authentication on SSH, which generally isn't a good idea to leave enabled, as there are many automated bots out there performing SSH brute forcing. Before I was able to do that, however, I first needed to make sure that my
Suara. Okay. The thing is, let's check the checklist. Some of it's I'm just discarded completely, but yeah, you know, it's fine. Okay.
So you want to self-host Next.js? Well, we have a couple of options these days to do that, and it's actually a much smoother experience than in the past. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to deploy Next.js with Dogploy to a VPS, and as you'll see, it's actually a great experience these days.
Okay.
So I showed you in another
Aman,
video how
aman.
to do it with Coolify. A lot of you like that video, so let's also talk about the alternative you have, Dogploy. I would say Dogploy and Coolify are now two popular options to do this in a very smooth manner. They have some subtle differences, but overall I would say they are both really good. And they both make hosting Next.js on a VPS a very realistic option. So I'm really happy to see these tools grow in the ecosystem. So we're going to deploy it to a VPS. So we will need a VPS. And I've actually really enjoyed using Hostinger. They are today's sponsor. And the reason is actually that they have these VPS templates out of the box. So they already have a Dogploy VPS template. They also have a Coolify VPS template. They even have an Ollama VPS template. So if you want to self-host AI models, that's also possible these days. But they are on the cutting edge as well. So they know what you're doing if you're using Dogploy, right? So it's not like we're doing something weird in our VPS. This is already something that they are configured for. Okay, so we need a Next.js app. So I have a very simple Next.js app here. It's very basic. We just have an API route, a server action, and one, let's take a look, one homepage. Okay, so I added a server action and a route handler so we can see if these features in the Next.js app router still work on the VPS, right? So if I click on this button, it's going to fetch data from a server action. If I click on that button, it's going to fetch data from a route handler. So let's see if we can deploy to the VPS, and then we will double check if these features still work, okay? Okay, so where do we start? We have a Next.js app here locally. Well, I would start by just creating a GitHub repository. So I'm actually just going to call this Next.js app. I will just keep it private and just create a repository. Then I will actually just add all the changes first, and then I will commit and push to GitHub, okay? So now we will have our app here on GitHub, and from here we can take it to the VPS. Okay, so let me actually close this and this as well. So now we need a VPS so we can actually get Dogploy up and running and then pull in our app. So I'm gonna use host.
Ini mau coba ke VPS. Okay, I think should we just get the VPS right now?
You can find a link in the description, by the way. So I'm gonna use EU things to apply it. picking the one that's closest to you. Alright, so here for operating system, we can go with a plain Ubuntu install. However, like I said, they have Dogploy here as a template, right? Dogploy. There we go. Actually, they also
Sebenarnya
have
domainnya
Dogploy
udah ada.
as well, right here. If you're hosting AI models, they have Olama here as well with OpenWeb UI. I'm gonna go with the Dogploy install here. But if you do want to install Dogploy yourself, they show you the commands here on the website themselves. But I have to say it's much easier with a template. It's like, so I will just confirm here and I will continue with paying for the VPS. Alright, so after paying, we can go through the setup here. Sure, I'll take the free scanner. And here we can set up a password for our VPS. You will need this if you directly want to log into your VPS. However, as you'll see with Dogploy, we don't need to do much like that ourselves. We can do a lot of it from the admin panel in Dogploy. I will still set up a password here. Okay, so I have a password. You can just put that somewhere. Make sure you don't show it to anyone else. We'll continue here. Okay, finish the setup. And then it's going to provision the resource. And so I will see you back in a second. Alright, and after a couple minutes, it is ready for us. And we can immediately access our VPS by SSHing into it. However, as you'll see with Dogploy, we can do a lot of it from the Dogploy panel itself. Alright, so here in Hostinger, you can see now we have the overview with all of our VPS information. And they give us some information, by the way, so if you want to read up on that on how to do it in Hostinger, but we can also just go to the manage panel and see what's going on here. Let's continue to the site. And here we have our Dogploy panel, right? Our dashboard here. And we need to create like an admin user. So let's quickly do that. Make sure you don't forget your password. People seem to forget it often for this type of accounts. Let's register here. And here we go. So here we are now inside the dashboard running on our VPS. So I like to start off by actually getting a proper domain name for our admin panel here. So you can go to your DNS provider, and actually Hostinger provides domains as well. So I can go to the main menu here, and here under domains, I have all my domains that I registered. So I already have this bytegradcourses.com domain, right? So I run an e-learning website, so this domain makes sense to me. So here under DNS, I can specify this A record. So I will take actually the admin. So it will be like admin.bytegradcourses.com.
I forgot the difference between A and C record. Is C record the WW1, I think? Okay. Let's do I have a self-hosting, the practice of running blah 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 Docker. I forgot what am I doing this? Okay. This release. Okay. I think let's do VPS checklist. So
that will be my web panel dashboard. So here under web server, we can set things up. However, we first need to get the actual IP on which it is running here. So Dogploy automatically recognizes that, and it gives us the server IP here. So we want the admin to point to that. Okay, I'm gonna add the record. Okay, successfully created. So now if I go to bytegradcourses.com, okay, so here if I continue to site, okay, now if you try going there right now, you won't see anything yet. So in here we also need to specify that. So here we have to say it will be admin.bytegradcourses.com. Your email, certificate provider, let's encrypt, and I will save here. Okay, domain assigned. So now it may take a couple seconds or so, but now if I go here and I will just continue here, you can see now I am using admin.bytegradcourses.com. And the HTTPS, it may take a couple more seconds. Yeah, so if you try again after a couple seconds, you can see that also we have HTTPS now for the admin dashboard, right? So this is not what our end users would see. This is just for us, so we can log in a nice, and now I can log in again with my credentials. All right, so here we are now back in the dashboard. What next? Well, now we actually want to add our GitHub project here, right? So I will create a project. This is just like a container for anything you may be building. Could also be a database. This is just like what are we, because you could have an app, you could have a database, you can have multiple things for the same project, right? So what could we do here? I'll just call this my first project and create the project, right? So then this is our project, this is the project level. So then we can add an application, a database, or some kind of Docker Compose setup. However, we are only going to use one application here, and we will just call this my first app, and I will leave the default. Okay, so now we have this app service. Let's go there. All right, so here's where we're going to configure things for our actual Next.js app, but it does need to, so we want to pull it, of course, from GitHub into Dogploy here, and actually you can use other providers, of course, but in this case, we are going to use GitHub, and so we do need to connect our GitHub account first. So let's go to settings here, and here I'm going to pick GitHub, and I will create a GitHub app. Okay, so it gives me this name, and actually I'm not sure why, but it keeps saying that the name is already taken, so I'm just going to add some gibberish. Okay, so now our actual, but as we can see, there are no deployments yet. So if we go to general here, we can actually click on deploy. by default, if you have the starter template, the standard starter template,
Hello,
it will
hello,
feel if
Andrew.
you have even one
How
text
are
error.
you?
If your deployment isn't working, make sure to check out the logs as well. So they will show you the logs. I will just check it out.
Hello,
Right, so it's now running. Let's actually view
Andrew.
here's the code, so we
Hello,
can also view the logs.
hello.
If you scroll up a little bit, you can see it's cloning that repo, so it's getting the code, and then it's going to run an npm run build of our Next.js app. Yeah, so here you can see now it's creating an optimized production build. So one of the steps in there is checking the validity of types, and actually it will fill the build if even one type is not.
I think the first thing that we've never really tested is running the build locally, because Alhamdulillah, we never really tested it before, running like local builds. Probably. I am good. Gimana kabar, Pak? Capek, Pak? Capek ditolak mulu. Okay. We never really run the npm run build actually, so I think we should test it out. Like, npm build, right? We've never really tried it before. Belum ada yang tahu lah, Pak. Build. No, I mean like, is there any deploying? Let's see deployment. Hello, Abdulhag. Yeah, using Next.js. It's a directory website. Supposed to be simple, but I'm overcomplicating everything. So, yeah. Oh shit! I forgot actually. I need to implement like the email. I forgot. God damn it. Okay. Thank you, but it's still. I forgot. I need to add the email. I'm sorry. I forgot. Okay. Yeah, add pagination to admin resources. Formal production server must like just host the GP and XF for use other server. Oh god, I forgot about that. Okay, let's just do it now then. It stays. God, I forgot so much. The email sub thing form. I forgot. Okay, let's not run the build, or we can. If you run the build, you okay? Yeah. Fuck, I forgot. Okay. Okay. I just realized I could have taken notes instead of thinking everything I had to do in my head. That's what it's for, I guess. Yeah, I think it's just I forget a lot. So this really helps. I forgot. I cannot deploy yet. There is one feature that I forgot to implement. Yeah, the email something form. It's not working yet. Like, If I start to think this, I will forget to take them. What's this new chat? And okay, the deployment to Dogploy is not that hard. This is like a matter of the application itself. It's not.
I believe we should just leave it like
I
this.
haven't finished every feature yet. Okay, so even though I collect, see I mean like the email here and the email form here, sorry, in the individual page are not working yet. So I think we could just remove them from now and add them later. Using BetterAuth. And Google, if they use Google Sign In, let's use Google. You know what? I think I'm just gonna I'm just not gonna implement the email first. So let's just do that. Sponsor site or yes, this is still using local because everything is still local. Just the one on Google, the one because it's not deployed yet, right? Okay, sidebar skeleton, and then in the sponsor sidebar, we can also remove the email because we could just uncomment them back later once the feature is ready where I had set up a backend on it. Yeah, okay. The email, we're gonna set them up later. Let's just see how that goes. Okay, yeah, it is much cleaner as well, I think. Now, just for the footer, we can, yeah, we can just I need an SMTP server for it. What do you mean? For the email? Ah, regarding the the getting the email one. So yeah, but no, I'm not. I don't think I'm gonna do that. That's why I'm removing it and adding them maybe sometimes later. Yeah, that's why I don't want to implement it. I think yeah, I'm just not gonna do that. I'm just gonna remove that. I don't yeah. It's not necessary for the purpose of this the purpose of the project. So I'm just gonna leave it out. Okay, which one is this? Let's see how would that destroy the footer or would just make it like that? Okay, cool. I don't mind. I don't mind. The footer just looks very basic anyway, so I don't mind. Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna, yeah, dealing with the fact that VPS provider bans the SMTP ports 100% of the time. Yeah, so I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that right now. How do I implement? But if I think using like a third party would be better, no? Like, uh, I don't know what's the best way to have like an email newsletter. Yeah, I think using the third-party email services would be much easier. And plus, yeah, you know, it's not really a main purpose of the website anyways, so it's totally fine. Yeah, let's just not deal with this right now. Let's just do it later. I mean, do I need it? I don't. Okay. Let's see other like directory. Never mind. This is actually nice. I want to implement what's it called? Umami. This for simple analytics, just to see how much user, like how much reviews, something, yeah, things like that. Probably not. Only just tracking the pages, like the number of visits, I think. Would that still be required? Or just to be safe, I think. If you will implement it, you will do, yeah, okay. Wow. Okay, this takes a long time. Okay. I think let's just not worried about the email stuff. So this is fine. Um, as long as you don't go North Korea tracking. Yeah, not really. I mean, like, I just want to know, like, how many visitors visit the website and just simple things like that. Just because this is a simple website that I overcomplicated and over engineered for the sake of learning. Probably spend too much time and budget. I think I'm gonna spend like 15 or 20 euros for this project, but I learned a lot, document a lot, but I don't know if the return would be better or not. But you know, it's fine. I enjoy it. I learn too much. I learn a lot. Let's see. What does Grok has with this? To integrate Umami at this Indonesia, follow this step by step. Umami is progressive focus, blah blah blah. Doesn't represent data by default. Full control for the self-hosting or easy setup. Yeah, I'm gonna self-host it with other server or like the free one, the free VPS. This guy use Umami Cloud. No, let's not use Umami Cloud. But I think as it doesn't use cookie by default. Okay, so once I stored custom events. Okay, what can you elaborate on what custom events? Like to see which page has the most liked or like which page has the most views, something like that. Or is there anything else that is considered a custom events? Unlike automatic tracking. Oh, okay. Custom events are manually defined to capture user behaviors, helping you analyze user engagement and conversion like newsletter. Ah, okay. So if I have that, I need to have a cookie banner. Okay. For context. Button click. Why track to measure interest in specific content? You may not need cookie banner. However, for GDPR class user, include Umami in your cookie banner if you track custom events with potentially identifiable data. I guess let's just launch it, and I'm not sure since should I consider the legal stuff first, or I just go North? Yeah, I mean I'm not really going North Korea tracking side of that. I just want to know the pages and stuff, but I don't want to get sued for trying to make a project. Okay. Okay, I think what we can do is, I think I haven't commit them yet to. So So let's just commit the footer like button, sponsors, and everything. And commit eat more like button fix and email form commented add later. Enter, and I think we need to do a pull request. Yeah, and then delete the branch, and then just, yeah. Oh, wait. Let me check the... Have I pushed it? I don't think I have pushed it. Wait. That's why it's not working. Wait. Sorry, the lazy git give me give me a bit of a headache when dealing with this. So I should sync changes, right, to git push, right? Yeah. Okay, commit, and then let's compare pull request. Create pull request. No conflict. Let's merge them. Okay, successfully merged. And I think if we go back to here, merge pull request number 6. It's already the latest one. 2 minutes ago, we can delete the branch. We can convert, and we can, yeah. Git check out main, git pull. Okay, and then git status, it's already up to date, and then git branch delete branch, and then we can git branch dash d. You can delete that branch onto the main, so it's a clean branch. Should we create a readme? Like a proper readme? I'm not sure. Okay.
You are looking at SSH login attempts to a brand new virtual private server that I just created. And if you have your own VPS and you haven't taken the steps to lock it down, try running this command to see if there are login attempts happening. And you'll be surprised at what you find, because there are hackers running automated scripts 24/7 trying to find and exploit vulnerable servers, and you don't want to be a victim of this. Now, in this video, I'm going to show you the basics of setting up and locking down a VPS to prevent these login attempts and automatically block other types of attacks as well. Now, this will be the first video in a series on self-hosting with the VPS. So if this kind of thing interests you, let us know in the comments, and also stick around for future videos in the series where we take this VPS and turn it into a web server or a database server. Now, whether you're a complete beginner, a hobbyist, or a developer that wants to start managing their own servers, this video will show you everything you need to know to create a secure, locked-down VPS that's ready to run any service you throw at it. So let's jump in. I'm CJ, welcome to Syntax. Now, if you're new to the world of VPSs, welcome. There are a lot of things you can do with them and a lot of reasons why you would want to manage one yourself. Now, a VPS is just one way to host things on the web. If you're interested in learning about more, check out episode 615 of Syntax, where Wes and Scott compare the different kinds of hosting and the various providers. Now, like I mentioned, you can do a lot of things with a VPS, and one of the reasons people typically start learning about and looking into VPSs is to self-host. Things like a personal media server like Plex, Jellyfin, or Emby, or host their own cloud with something like Nextcloud, or host photos with something like PhotoPrism, or host your own password manager with like Bitwarden or Passbolt. But you can also self-host your own applications and web services, things like a custom Discord bot, or some long-running process, or like a WebSocket server, or self-host your own instance of Sentry. You could also run web servers like Nginx, Apache, or Caddy. You can host databases like MySQL, Postgres, MongoDB, or Redis, and others, and ultimately reduce your dependency on managed services like Vercel, Netlify, Heroku, Render, Railway, Fly.io, am I missing any? And also managed database services like AWS, RDS, PlanetScale, Neon, and others. Now, in episode 730 of Syntax, Wes and Scott talk about some of these PaaS, or Platform as a Service alternatives. They talk about things like Piku, Doku, Kubero, Caprover, Coolify, probably a couple others, and these all allow you to get the same functionality as Vercel or Netlify, but running on your own server.
Own
Now,
server.
managing a
Yeah, that's
VPS
the goal.
is not for the faint of heart. It requires constant attention and maintenance, which is why managed services exist, and why this type of
True.
thing is typically a full-time job. But if this kind of thing still interests you, let's get into it. Now, the next part of this video
Well, I
will
mean,
assume that you
as an
want to set up a
unemployed,
VPS and
I
you
do
have
have
the time.
time
So
and
like I mentioned, check out episode 615 of Syntax
to learn
if you'd
and
like to
just
know
deal
where
with
to get
this.
more
I don't
and
mind.
more about these various hosting providers. Now, I'm going to be setting up a tiny VPS. It's running Ubuntu 22.04. It has 1 gig of RAM, 1 CPU, and 10 gigabytes of disk space. Now, this video is not sponsored by any VPS hosting or domain provider, so I'm going to keep things fairly generic so you can use whatever you can afford and whatever you prefer. Now, depending on the type of workload you're going to be running on this VPS, you might need better specs. But for me, I'm going to have a few static sites, a few Node.js applications, and a couple databases. So the minimal
So
specs.
why did okay if CJ could host like all of those services in a 1 gigabyte VPS, why the one that
that I
tested
mentioned will work for
wasn't able
all
to do it? Is it just the poor hardware compared to this? Is it like the
Now, let's
quality of
connect
the
to our
hardware, like
VPS. For this, we're going to
does this like the CPU clock speed matter, the type of RAM compared, yeah, is it relatively to the amount per gigabyte or
use
megabyte?
a thing called SSH. And you're going to need a terminal to do this. Now, on a Mac, I am using an app called iTerm. You can also use the built-in terminal on a Mac. If you're on Windows, there's a thing called Windows Terminal. If you're on Linux, just search for the app called Terminal and open it up. And we're going to want to run the command SSH. So once it's open, we're going to type SSH, and then we'll need to type the username that has been set up for us on the VPS. Now, this is going to vary by where you got your VPS. For me, the VPS username is root, and we're going to log in with that. Yours might be admin or Ubuntu or Debian. It might vary, but for me it's root, and then after the @ sign, we're going to put in the IP address of our server. Now, this IP address will be listed in whatever dashboard of wherever
You mean the difference between root server and VPS? Like what do you mean?
you got your VPS, but this is a public IP address, and that means anyone in the world that's on the internet will be able to access the server at this IP address, just like we're about to access this server. Now, you should have a command that's SSH username @ IP address, hit enter, and now it's going to attempt to connect. Now, the first time you're ever connecting to a server, you're going to see this warning, and here you can just type yes. And what this is doing is it's storing the fingerprint of this server on your computer, so the next time you connect, it's going to validate that fingerprint. Now, the next time you connect, you shouldn't see this warning. And if you ever see this warning again and you haven't changed anything on the server, then that means something has gone wrong. Something is potentially compromised. Like the SSH key on the server has actually changed. And sometimes there's a legitimate reason for that. But just so you know, you should only see that warning the first time you connect to the server, and you shouldn't see it anytime after that. Now we'll need to type in our password. Now, as you type, you're not going to see anything on the screen here in the terminal, but as long as you type everything correctly, you should get connected to your server. Now, one of the first things you should do when you connect to your VPS for the first time is run updates and upgrades. So, like I mentioned earlier, I'm running Ubuntu 22.04, so all of these commands will work if you're on an Ubuntu or Debian-based system. Now, depending on what your VPS has set up for you, if you are not connecting as the root or super user, then all of these commands you're going to need to type sudo in front of. So, like sudo apt upgrade or sudo apt install. For me, because I'm running as the root user, I will not need to put sudo in front of those commands. But if you try running those commands and it says you don't have permission, put sudo in front of them. So the first thing
Okay.
we're going to do is just say apt update. Now, this command isn't going to actually upgrade anything. It's just going to update the package lists locally on your machine. So when you do run an upgrade or you do run an install, it's always grabbing the latest versions from those specific repositories. So now that we have the latest package list,
I want to host a Next.js app.
so you can see that it says 76 packages can be upgraded. So we're going to run the upgrade command. So I'll just do apt upgrade, and that's going to grab and install all of the latest versions of all the packages that I have installed. And we can confirm this with Y, and it'll start downloading and upgrading everything. Now, you might be wondering, why are we upgrading? One of the ways to keep your VPS secure is to always be running the latest versions of all packages. Because when hackers attempt to gain access to a machine or exploit a machine, typically they're taking advantage of old broken versions. And so anytime a package has an upgrade, a lot of times it's potentially a bug fix or a vulnerability fix. And so we always want to make sure we're always running the latest versions of all packages, just to make sure that we always have the latest fixes and patches for anything that we're using on our system. Now, when you run this upgrade, you may or may not see this notice that there is a pending kernel upgrade. Now, the kernel is like the root of the operating system, and this is another thing that could potentially be vulnerable. So we always want to be running the latest version of.
I've been looking into using Dogplay as well for easy UI such UX, but want to learn a bit more on making the server secure.
Of the kernel. Now, if you upgrade the kernel, you are going to have to restart the machine, which is why we typically want to run these commands before we do anything else on the VPS, because we're going to need to reboot it a few times before we can start running our own applications. So I'm going to do the kernel upgrade here, and then from there we'll likely restart our machine. Now, this is asking me what services should be restarted.
Thank
like
you.
I said,
Nice
we are
server
running
running,
this on an
yeah.
entire machine, so we actually don't really even have to worry about this. I can just OK through it.
I
because
just want to make sure everything is okay, because this is my first time doing it, and I don't want to
once we reboot the whole machine,
make any
all the
mistake. And
services-
plus, I'm streaming it as a part of learning. I might leak some stupid stuff, so that's already a terrible thing. But I don't know. We'll see.
Now that all of the upgrades have run, and in my case, I also upgraded the kernel, you can do this to determine if you need to reboot. So if you do an ls/var/run/reboot required, if that exists, that means your machine needs to be rebooted. And there are different ways to do this. You can actually do this from the command line if you just type reboot, but you can also do it from your VPS dashboard. And that's how I'm going to do it, just because I want to make sure that this thing actually reboots. Because if you accidentally shut down the machine and there's no way to restart it in your dashboard, you're going to have to reach out to the support team of wherever you're hosting your VPS.
I am currently German. I didn't hear. So yeah,
So
the YouTube is in
For my VPS,
YouTube
there's a
the
dashboard where I can
German,
literally say
yes.
restart VM. So I am going to exit from my SSH session here, go to my dashboard, and restart the VPS. Now that the machine has rebooted, we're going to SSH back in. And once you're in, you shouldn't see system restart required. That's a good sign. And also, if it says 0 updates can be applied immediately, you should be good to go. But since I upgraded the kernel, it's likely that some more packages can be upgraded as well. So we're actually going to do an apt upgrade again. Now, in my case, it says there are a couple of packages that have been kept back and it didn't auto-install them. So I'm actually just going to try to install them directly. So I'm going to copy their names and then just do an apt install with those names. Now, you may not have gotten that error, and that's completely fine. If it says you have no upgradable packages, you're good to go. But at this point, because I did install those, if I do an apt upgrade now, I should see there's nothing to be upgraded, which means I'm on a fully upgraded system.
Change root password. Yeah, okay.
Now, the next thing I'll do is change the root user's password. Now, for me, in my VPS dashboard, they literally gave me a password that I could copy-paste to log in as the root user, and I don't want to be able to do that. So I'm going to change it to something that only I know and something that can't be copy-pasted from the dashboard. So if you type PASSWD, that will prompt you to change the password for the currently logged in user. In this case, I'm going to change the password of the root user. Now, you won't see anything when you're typing your password, but as long as you type it correct both times, it'll change the password. Now, to check it, I'll exit the SSH session and re-log in with my new password
What?
of the root user. Now, you won't see anything when you're typing your password, but as long as you type it correct both times, it'll change the password. Now, to check it, I'll exit the SSH session and re-log in with my new password. So I've confirmed my updated password works. Now we can start locking down the server. And one of the first concepts you'll learn in security is the principle of least privilege. And if we're running all of our commands as root, we always have super user privileges. If you type ID in the terminal and your user ID is 0, that means you are the super user. You can do anything on this machine. And there are some things we need super user privileges for, but we don't need it for everything. So we're going to create a secondary user, and they will not have super user permissions by
Probably having some type of monitoring is advised. Okay.
default, but we'll be able to
Would it be like in a form of like a, how would you say it? Like a, so like, like maybe like a notification or like a message if there's something wrong with the server or something like that, I would assume.
run things with super user permissions if they require it. Now, to add a new user, we can use the add user command. So I'm going to type add user and then the name of the user. In this case, I'm going to call it CJ because that's me. So this will create the user, and it's going to ask for a password. Now, give it a password, but give it a different password than the root user. You don't want those passwords to be exactly the same for security purposes. So I'm going to give this a password now. After you set up the password, it'll ask you a few more questions. Just fill those out. And for some of these, you can just leave them blank if you don't have any info for it. Now that we've created the user, they're a regular plain old user. They can't do anything as the super user yet. But what we'll do is we'll add them.
Yeah, exactly. For services, you could use Uptime. For security aspect, there are other tools you can provide that. Wazoo or Loki. Ah, okay. I'll write it down. Is Uptime, and then for security, Wazoo or Loki. Go. I've never really heard about it. What is Wazoo and what is it actually? First, but I guess first get the basic out and later I don't know. Roger that. Pure open source solution with one unified XDR for okay, what is this? Protection for endpoints and cloud workloads. What is XDR? Actually, extended urgent response. Cybersecurity that integrates and automates threat detection and response across the rest. Was it could be a bit overkill. Okay. What about Grafana? Analytics and interactive visualization. Chart graphs and alerts for the web when connected to supported data sources. I will definitely look them up. Yeah, but of course, I think setting them up would be the main thing that I should focus.
If they need to. So to do this, we're going to do a user mod. We'll do dash lowercase a dash capital G, and then we will specify sudo and then the username. In this case, my username is CJ.
Let's get a user and yeah. It's user mod /AG sudo and then the name user. Okay.
Now from here, if we want to make sure it worked, we can type groups and then the name of the user, and we'll see the groups that they're in. So by default, a user is always in a group with their own name, so I'm in the CJ group, but you can see that we've added that sudo group as well. So now to try this out, let's actually exit our SSH session as root and try logging in as this new user that we created. So I'm going to exit, we're going to do an SSH, but now instead of logging in as root, we're going to type the username that we just created. We'll type in the password, and we're good to go. So now we are able to log into the machine, but not as the root user. And like I said, this is one of the first.
But if I'm not mistaken, if I check like deploy, they still need a root user to install them. Maybe after setting up the deploys, then can set up the root. I guess Wazoo could be a bit. Oh yeah, okay. After running the instance script deploy and its dependencies will be set up. Create the admin account. Okay, it doesn't really say how it would. Okay, you know, it's okay. Docly, Deploy.js SDK, template collection. Cleans old metrics. Oh, you can have like a alert here. Then you can have some sort of monitoring here. Before setting up monitoring, navigate remote server, set up server that you see green check mark. Hello, hello. Waalaikumsalam. Halo. Bapak Destino, apa kabar? How are you? When are you gonna upload more videos? Why are you not applying anymore? Why are you not posting anymore? Agak telat ya guys. Telat masuk. Good, good, great.
Steps.
YouTube. You should do something. You should see something like this. I suck at it, bro. Me too. Me too.
Of locking down the machine is making sure that you're not always doing things as the root user. Now you can see that Ubuntu is actually being very helpful right now, and it's saying if you want to run something as the administrator or as the super user, you can use the sudo command. So for example, if I tried running an app update like we did when we
When are you going back? I am not sure, my friend.
Basically, that means we don't.
I would probably, if I don't receive any info by September, maybe September.
But if I'd like to perform this action as the super user, I can do sudo apt update. Now it's going to ask for your password the first time, and this is your user password. So just type that in, and from there it will run the command with super user privileges. Now you can use this sudo command for any command that you want to run as the super user. Now if you're new to Linux and
maybe September, but not entirely sure. I still don't know, because I received no information from the city here for the residence permit. I don't know.
You are basically unlocking the ability to understand this classic XKCD joke of if you put sudo in front of any command, you now are executing it as the super user. And sudo used to stand for super user do, but now the command can also be used to run commands on the machine as other users as well. So it actually stands for substitute user do, and it allows you to perform commands as other users. And by default, it'll perform the command.
Okay, selamat makan. See you next time.
Now, the next step in locking down the machine is making it so that we connect with an SSH key instead of a password. Now, to do this, you will need an SSH key. I'm going to link this article by GitHub in the description. It shows you how to generate an SSH key if you don't have one.
I think I already have some SSH key.
Now, it's important to note that SSH key that you generate should be generated on your local machine, the machine that you're going to be connecting to the VPS from, not on the VPS itself. So make sure when you follow the directions to generate the SSH key, it's happening on your local machine. Now, that SSH key locally on your machine lives in your home folder in a folder called .ssh. And for me, this is the public key file. And if we run the cat command on it, we can see the contents of it. Now, this is completely okay to share because this is my public key. I would not want to share the private key, which is in the file without the .pub on it.
Ah, okay.
The public key, completely okay to share, and this is what we need to add to the server to be able to log in using this SSH key. Now let's add this public key to the VPS. So I'm going to copy my public key, and then over on the VPS, I need to create a folder in my home folder called .ssh. So right now I'm in my home folder, I'm going to make a directory called .ssh, and then I need to create a file called authorized_keys. Now to do this, I'm going to use a command line tool called Nano. It's very easy to use. Basically, it's a command line text editor, and then I'm going to specify the file name. So I want to edit the file called .ssh/authorized_keys. Now, once I'm in here, this is just a text editor. I can type whatever I want, but I need to put my public key into this file. So I'm going to paste it in, and then I'm going to exit and save the file. So you can see in Nano, it literally tells us to exit, we can press Control X, and then to save it, we'll press Y and then hit enter. So now my public key is in that authorized key file. And that's actually all we need. If I exit my session here and then try SSHing back in, you'll notice it doesn't ask for my password and just instantly logs me in. And this is because behind the scenes, it was doing a public-private key negotiation and allowed me to log in with my SSH key.
Because you already set up the SSH. Okay.
Now that we've set up our SSH key, we are going to disable password login entirely. And this is how we're going to stop attackers from trying a bunch of different passwords, is no one will be able to log into our server with a password. You have to use an SSH key once we enable this setting. Now, it's important to note, if you're connecting to this VPS from other computers, you're going to need to make sure that you set up an SSH key on those machines as well, and you add the public key to that authorized keys file that we worked on earlier. But at this point, let's disable password login. Now, to disable password login, we're going to need to edit the SSHD config. We'll use sudo for this because we need super user privileges to edit that file. We'll use nano because it's a text file, and the file is at /etc/ssh/sshd_config. Now, we'll edit this file, and because we're using sudo, we'll have to type in our user password. Now, once we're in the file, we can hold the down arrow to get to the section. It's a text file, and the file is at /etc/ssh.
But I think if I'm not mistaken, in Hetzner, you can set up the server with SSH directly without user input. So would that mean I wouldn't need to do this? Can just delete this. Like if we go into the dashboard of, okay, what is this important message? What is this? Ah, okay. This is if there is a, okay. Look out for emails with fake sender like Hetzner, Hetzner support, Hetzner online. The sender is also fake. Does not end at hetzner.com. Okay, so just be aware of phishing email. Okay, good. Let's just hopefully not get screwed. This is an example. So if you create a server here, I think it was in the Nuremberg, or I think it's the Falkenstein one. And then a shared VP CPU, the 2 gigs, CX22 type with 4 gigabytes of RAM. And then I think public IP, yeah, that works. Yeah, okay, here we go. Use SSH for secure and official authentication. Insert the key is open SSH format. If you add an SSH key, no root credential will be sent via email. So group multiple servers. Okay, we don't have that. Color config. Okay. But yeah, I think I want. I think for security, I don't mind using SSH. This is going to be the primary machine anyways. So okay, thank you, Hetzner.
Now we'll edit this file, and because we're using sudo, we'll have to type in our user password. Now once we're in the file, we can hold the down arrow to get to the section on password authentication. Now, I will note that in the previous section, I said that login with SSH key would just work. If it's not working for you, it's possible that this setting was not set to yes. So make sure that you set this setting to yes. But we're looking for the password authentication setting. So yeah, right now, password authentication is set to yes. I want to set this to no, and then save the file.
If think it's in @c, etc. SSH and SHD underscore config.
Now, I will note that in the previous section, I said that log on those machines as well, HD underscore config. Now, we'll edit this file, and because we're using sudo, we'll have to type in our user password. Now, once we're in the file, we can hold the down arrow to get to the section on password authentication. Now, I will note that in the previous section, I said that login with SSH key would just work. If it's not working for you, it's possible that this setting was not set to yes, so make sure that you set this setting to yes. But we're looking for the password authentication setting. So yeah, right now, password authentication is set to yes. I want to set this to no, and then save the file. Now, on my machine, there's actually another config that I need to update, and that is in the .d folder. So if we take a look, in that folder, there's also sshd underscore config.d, and inside of there, there's a cloud init file. And this file actually also has password authentication set to yes, so I want to make sure that I set this one to no as well. So we'll save that, update it, and now we need to restart the SSH service to get these settings to kick in. So I'm going to do sudo service SSH restart. Now to test if this worked, let's actually try logging in as the root user. So I'm going to SSH in as root. And if we get this error, permission denied public key, we know that it's working because we didn't set up a public key for the root user. We only set it up for our other user. And now we actually can't log in with a password as the root user. But if we try SSHing in as the user we created, the public-private key exchange should happen and we should get logged into the machine. Now, we've locked things down so we can only log in via an SSH key, but to lock things down even further, we're going to prevent login via the root user over SSH entirely. So to do this, we'll jump into that same config file. We're going to go down to the section that says permit root login. And we're going to remove the hash, which will actually enable this configuration. By default, without password just means that it would only allow the public-private key authentication for the root user, but we're actually just going to set this to no, and that way the root user cannot log in via SSH at all. So we'll save this file, and then we'll restart the SSH service. So we'll do sudo service SSH restart. And from here,
I think it's a good practice to only okay. Would locking down the root be a good idea, or if there's like an emergency? Sorry. From IP, like the laptop's IP, right?
root can no longer log in via SSH. Now, the next step in locking down your VPS is to control the network and firewall policy. Now, for me, my VPS provider has a dashboard where I can open and close various ports on the firewall. You might have that as well. You're going to want to look for a section called ports or firewall or network. But if you don't have that section in your VPS provider dashboard, you can actually use an application firewall. So built into Ubuntu is an application called UFW, or Uncomplicated Firewall, and it allows you to control the firewall from the command line directly on the VPS itself. But since my provider has a dashboard where I can control all of the ports and everything, I'm going to be using that for all of this network stuff that I talk about. Now, the first thing we'll do is close all ports that don't need to be open. Now, if you're new to all of this stuff, ports are like little doorways on your computer that can receive and respond to network requests. And so, for example, we've been connecting to our VPS via SSH, and by default,
Which
the
is
SSH service is
22,
running on port
I think.
22 to respond to those SSH requests. Now, if you're not running anything else on your machine that needs to be exposed to the internet, like you don't have a web server or you don't have a database or anything else, you can just close down all other ports. So either use UFW to do this from the command line or go into your VPS provider dashboard, and any ports that it has open, like a lot of times port 80 and 443 will be open by default because the provider assumes that you're going to be running an HTTP or HTTPS service, and those services respond on those specific ports. But if you're not going to have a web server there, you can close those ports. So just remove those rules that open up those ports, or if you're using UFW, use it to either open or close those ports.
Where are OG from?
Now, one of the
Where I'm from? I'm from Indonesia. Is it me or which OG originally from?
Lock down a machine further is change the port that SSH is running on. Now, we mentioned it runs on port 22, but you could run it on 2222 or 4242. You could pick a port number. And to do that, you would need to go into your firewall, whether it's in a dashboard or it's from the command line, and open up the port that you want to run SSH on. And then you can go into that configuration file that we were in earlier, and there's actually a section that will let you set the port that SSH runs on. Now, if you do this, this is one way of preventing automated attacks against your server, because a lot of scripts that hackers are running will assume that SSH is running on
That's
port
actually,
22
yeah.
22 is open. So if you close 22 and run SSH on a different port, that's going to prevent those automated attacks. Now, there are ways of poking and prodding at a server to figure out what ports are open, and if any ports are open, attempting to figure out what services are running on those ports. So a savvy hacker will still be able to find your SSH port even if you change it from the default 22. Now, personally, I like the convenience of not having to type in the port number when I SSH, so I just leave SSH running on port 22. But again, this is one way of
Have you ever been to Indonesia before?
login attempts.
Vandermouse.
Now, you can further lock down these ports by restricting access to specific IP addresses. Now, by default, if you're setting up a rule and it has the IPv4 address 0.0.0.0, that means allow and respond to requests from any IP address. But let's say, for instance, you only want to allow access to port 22
Indonesia?
from your computer that you're running right now. If you have a static IP address, that means an IP address that doesn't change, you can set up that firewall rule so that it only allows connections from your IP address. Now,
Okay, I
don't
think
have a
this is
static
what
IP address,
Yahoo
I'm just running
mentioned,
home
right?
internet. And so day to day, my IP address might change. But if you're at a business or you're paying your internet service provider for a static IP address, then this is a kind of rule that you can set up. Where basically in the rule, instead of 0.0.0.0, you put your IP address, and now your server will only allow connections on that specific port from the IP address that you specify.
Wait, can you repeat that?
If you have a static IP address, that means an IP address that doesn't. Now, you can further lock down these ports. by
Oh,
restricting
very
access to
nice. Jakarta, Bali, and Lombok. Cool. Alright, this is the every question I ask. What is your favorite food? Did you try? Where did you go in Jakarta, Bali, and Lombok, to be specific, if you remember?
specific IP addresses. Now, by default, if you're setting up a rule and it has the IPv4 address 0.0.0.0, that means allow and respond to requests from any IP address. But let's say, for instance, you only want to allow access to port 22 from your computer that you're running right now. If you have a static IP address, that means an IP address that doesn't change, you can set up that firewall rule so that it only allows connections from your IP address. Now, I don't have a static IP address, I'm just running home internet. And so day to day, my IP address might change. But if you're at a business or you're paying your internet service provider for a static IP address, then this is a kind of rule that you can set up. Where basically in the rule, instead of 0.0.0.0, you put your IP address, and now your server will only allow connections on that specific port from the IP address that you specify. Now that things are locked down, we're going to want to make sure that our system stays up to date. And so for this, we're going to install a program called unattended-upgrades. So from the command line, if you do sudo apt install unattended-upgrades, this will install it. Now, my system came pre-configured with it, but if yours didn't, you're going to need to install it. From here, we're going to enable automatic updates. So you do sudo dpackage-reconfigure unattended-upgrades. This will run a little configuration wizard. You just want to say yes on enabling automatic upgrades. Now, from here, you're good to go, but you might want to customize it some more. So I'll link to the documentation in the description, but you'll notice that they talk about a specific config file that you can modify. So if we take a look at this, there are some settings inside of there, like the kind of updates that should be applied, and also further settings like should the machine be automatically rebooted and stuff like that. So if you say sudo nano and then the location of that file, you can edit it. Now, by default, only security updates are enabled. So these two lines here and these two lines here are for security updates. But if you want to automatically update other types of packages as well, you can uncomment these lines. So if you remove these two slashes, that actually makes it so that this line will be matched whenever it's running the automatic upgrades.
Oh, I always took dishes with rice. My dream was very tourist-like, so also a lot of us on food. What did you do in Jakarta? Only just for the transit, or do you go somewhere specific? In Bali and Lombok, it's definitely obvious, but like in Jakarta, do you go somewhere specific?
Update regular packages as well. Now, like I said, there are other options in here. I'll link the Git repo that talks about the other kinds of options, but there are options in here also for things like automatically rebooting, picking what time the server should reboot.
Did you try nasi padang? Oh my god.
You can also set up mail so that it sends you an email if there are updates that need to happen, these kinds of things. Now from here, we want to make sure that the service is running. So if I do a sudo systemctl status for unattended upgrades, as long as you see this output with a little green dot there, then that means the service is running in the background and it will be automatically installing updates. Now at this point, you can do whatever you want on your VPS. You can open ports, you can install services, it's yours to do what you would like. Personally, I'm a web developer, so in the next video in the series, I'm going to set up this machine to be a web server. I'm going to set up some static sites, I'll have some Node.js APIs running, I'll have a couple of databases running inside of containers.
Okay, I want to see that, CJ. How do you run it? Although I think he has a tutorial on Coolify, but he doesn't really have a tutorial on...
You are looking at
Oh, there we go. Losing SSH, VPN load. Okay, let's see.
What's up? CJ here. In this video, I'm going to be holding office hours. So last week, I posted a video called Self-Host 101 that showed you how to set up and secure a VPS or virtual private server. And in this video,
Oh, only for
I'm gonna be talking
transit.
about
Some friends visit Jakarta and took train down to Bali. That is crazy. But not really that crazy, but it's quite far. But that's interesting. did they visit the other cities as well? Because you pass a lot of cities from Jakarta to Bali, so it would be cool if they visit other
Comments,
cities as
questions,
well.
suggestions, corrections that appeared on that video. And all of these comments, questions, suggestions, corrections are coming from these fine people. So let's get into it. Before that, be sure to check out the post that I made over on X if you're looking for a VPS. So there are a few different places I listed where you can get a really cheap virtual private server if you want to start learning about this kind of thing. But definitely check the comments as well because there's lots.
AWS light sale. Let's see. I mean, like, I hear about it as well, but the pricing is still not as cheap as the other. Like, I mean, compared to Hetzner. So, yeah.
Lots of good suggestions of other places to find cheap VPSs, or for instance, even places where you might be able to get one for free. But definitely check out that post if you're looking to get your own VPS. Now, our first question comes from BadInfo259, and their question is how to get public IP. So when you're connecting to your VPS to configure it, you're going to need to connect over the public IP address. And this is going to vary depending on who your provider is. I have a few examples here, like Ionos has a dashboard and it shows your public IP there under like network. If you're using AWS Lightsail, you're going to see the IP address on the instance. And also you'll see a static IP if you've assigned it. If you're using Hetzner, there is a public IP section. If you're using Oracle, there's a section called Instant Access. So it's going to
Lightsail has image-based DevOps like LAMP and SQL Server. How much is the pricing for Beanstalk? Like, so who names this thing, man? Come on. I also tried Nasi Padang. I also quite like it. Cuisine Village is very good in my opinion. I like it more compared to Sukhiran, for example. Oh, that is. We feel proud of our food. I miss Indonesian food. Nasi Padang, yeah, Nasi Padang is amazing. I miss Nasi Padang. I've mentioned it dozens of times in the stream. Okay, sorry. Back to this. So Lightsail is usually pre-configured, up to 100 per instance. Pricing, fixed and predictable. Okay, where? If it's price. Beanstalk is automated deployment. Okay. They don't give out pricing. Come on, Amazon. I know you guys are like crazy.
vary depending on provider, but one thing you want to look out for is make sure that it is a public IP address that you're trying to connect to. So if you're not familiar with public versus private networks, I did a video over on Coding Garden where I kind of break down the difference between them. But you can make a quick note of this. If you see an address that starts with 10, that's a private IP address. If you see an address that starts with 172.16 all the way up to 172.31, those are also private. And if you see an IP address that starts with 192.168, that is also a private IP address. So if you're trying to connect to these, the only way you're going to get connected to them is if you're also on the private network.
Same network. Yeah.
These like, IP address that you're trying to connect to is on. So make sure it's a public IP, and then for any given provider, it's going to vary. So I would suggest just searching the web if you can't figure it out. Connect to VPS, and then whoever you got your VPS from, and they should have some documentation on how to find that public IP and how to connect. Great question, though. Thank you for that. Next, we have two questions. So the first one is from Optimizer Pro, and it says, if I don't have my machine where I log in with my secondary user, how can I log into the server if the root is disabled as well? And then we have a question from Scott Walter who says, what happens if you disable password login and lose your public key? So both of these have to do with potentially losing access to the server, because in the setup video, I talked about how to disable password auth over SSH and only allow public-private key authentication. But what if you lose that what if you lose that private key? How do you get in? And first we'll address connecting from a different machine, because you can actually set up multiple public keys on the server. So let's connect to my server, and I will show you in the SSH folder. So if you cd into .ssh, you should have that authorized keys file where you put your public key. And then if you edit it, you can actually add multiple public keys inside of here. So each public key will just be on a new line. And so you can actually go set up your SSH keys on some other machine and then add the public key here as well. And also if you want to share access to the server with someone else, you can put their public key into this file. So that's one way to connect from multiple machines. Just make sure you have all of the public keys listed in this authorized key.
Okay. I have another question, but I forgot. What was it? Oh, The weather, how's the weather though during your visit?
Keys file. Now, what happens if you completely lose access to the server? We'll talk about that because that's what Scott is saying. It's like, what if I don't have my private
Your
key
mic is
anymore,
too quiet for
um,
me. Oh
and
yeah,
you
I'm
can't
so
log in as a
sorry,
root
man.
user? In this case,
I
you're
need
going
to
to
speak it.
connect to the
I need
server
to put
and
it like
use the
here
console
if I want to
mode.
speak
So
like
again, this is going to
closer.
vary depending on who your VPS provider is, but I have some examples. So if you're using Ionos, they have this drop down here that says Open Remote Console. And this is not actually an SSH connection. This is using the hypervisor, or the thing that's actually hosting the VPS, to be able to connect directly to the machine, and you will be able to log in.
Is
as a
it
root user
still
if you set your
too
own
far,
password using the
or is it
console mode.
much better
So
now?
this again varies based on provider.
Or is it
but
because
hence
the
there are
audio of
different
the
modes. So
video
if
is
you select the console mode,
overpowering
then
my
it'll
voice?
put you into a console, and you can use your root password to log in. But basically, that's what you're going to need. And if your provider doesn't have a console mode, then you're kind of out of luck. In that case, you would potentially just have to reset the VPS and set a new root password and be able to relog in. But eventually in this series, I'm also going to talk about the idea of backups. So that way, if something catastrophic like this happens and you can't get in anymore, if you do have to reload the VPS, you at least have a backup that you can work from. So we'll talk
Much
about
better.
that.
Yeah, sorry. I just need to speak louder and just put the microphone closer.
From Phil Sola.
My
And it
microphone is also
"Thank
not
you
that
for walking
good.
through VPS basic setup and security measures. Really enjoyed it. Looking forward to the next one." Thank you, Phil. One question for my own understanding. We do something similar already with SSH keys at my day job, but we use .pim keys to log in. Is there any difference or benefits to doing that than the way you're doing it without? There isn't. And a PIM file is actually a privacy enhanced mail file that has a specific format. So it has begin private key. You'll actually have your private key inside of there, and then end private key. And you may not know this, but the SSH key that you generate to connect to a remote instance actually is a PIM file. It just doesn't have the extension. So if I look here on my local machine, you can see that I have this private key right here. But inside of that private key, it actually is just a PIM. It just doesn't have the PIM extension. And if we want to see an example of that, I am going to show the contents, but I'm not going to show my private key. I'm just going to grep for the string that should be in there, which is all caps private key. So if we say search that for private key, you'll see that inside of that, it actually is just a PIM file, and it doesn't have that PIM extension. But what's happening on your machine when you attempt to connect to a remote server, it's going to attempt to use your private key to log in. So that's why we don't have to specify it here. We have it there in the .ssh folder, and it's already been added to the SSH agent. And so it just happens by default. But when you're using a PIM file, you're just specifying the private key to use. So for example, we can actually connect by manually specifying that file there. So we can do ssh-i and then specify our PIM file, and then the server that we want to connect to. So, and now we are explicitly saying, hey, use this key file to connect to the server. And so that's basically what's happening when you specify that PIM file. And this is actually a really common way to like share access to a server. You might have a way at your company of like checking out these PIM files and then using them to connect. But one cool thing you can do is you can actually add that PIM file to the SSH agent, so you don't have to specify it manually every time. So you can actually do SSH agent add and then specify the PIM file that you want to add. Sorry, I think it's SSH add. Sorry, it's just SSH-add and then the PIM file that adds it to the SSH agent. And now
Can we use a
you can
VPN to connect to a VPS? How much load can a small... Okay, I'm gonna go skip to this.
Next up, we have a question from RaLacerDa12, who says, "Nice video. This video will be a great checklist for when I'm spinning up a new VPS. My question is, how much can you pack inside a 1 CPU, 1 GB RAM VPS? Will it be able to run a simple SQLite database with Nuxt, and any tips on how to make the most of it?" Now, first, thank you for your question, but this is going to vary widely depending on what you're actually trying to do with your VPS. And one of the things you can do is actually known as load testing. So I'll link this Wikipedia article here that talks about software load testing. Specifically, you want to do network load testing, and there's a couple of tools that are pretty popular. Like I've heard of JMeter, I've heard of Gatling, I've heard of Locust. These are all tools where you can simulate network traffic and see how your server responds. So if because this is going to depend on your type of app and how fast it responds and everything else, this is something that you might want to do. Like put your app on the server, start running it, and then create some sort of load test to see how your server responds to it. Because all of these tools will show you like how long it takes to respond, how many requests it can handle, that kind of thing. And so that's really the only way you're going to know if the server can actually handle it.
Two-factor
Now,
auth to
surface, I
SSH
think
login.
any
Ooh,
SQLite
that's
database
interesting.
fine. Maybe a few hundred users accessing your app, totally fine. But again, it's going to depend on how much load your server is actually getting and how many users you have. But specifically for tips on how to make the most of it, I will say that if you are running some node type app on a server, you're always going to want to make sure you're running in production mode. So Nuxt specifically, if you just search their site for production, they have a section on making sure that Nuxt is production ready, and you're going to want to make sure that you follow that. And specifically, you're going to want to make sure that you build the app. You would be surprised at the number of people I have found who are just doing like npm run dev on a production server instead of building the app and
Okay.
running the built files. And so that's
Let's not do that.
because when you're running in dev, the code isn't as optimized. But if you build it, you're going to get code that can just be run directly with Node. It won't need like TS Node.
Make sure to run the app
And then the other thing is you're going to want some kind
build
of process manager, because
or
if you just run this directly, if your
prod
server ever crashes and you don't have something watching that, then your server just crashes for everyone. But if you're running your app behind some sort of process manager, then it can automatically restart the process if it exits. So the Nuxt docs actually show you how to do this with PM2, and PM2 I'm familiar with, and you can actually create this ecosystem file, commit it to your source code, and then when you're running the app on the server after you've built it, you can just do a pm2 start, and it'll look at this file and determine how to start it. But it keeps track of all of the logs. You can set a log location.
Okay, I wanna just make sure, like, what's the difference of running npm dev and npm? Would, because from my understanding, that means like running the build is like all the TypeScript file changes into JavaScript. Would that just make it change all the? Okay, never mind. Hot reloading, changes to your code are instantly reflected into the browser. Hot module replacement updates browser in real time. Code is not minified or optimized, making it easier to debug but less efficient for production. Build your next AI for creating an optimized, static, or server-ready. Oh, okay. Compiling your app into an optimized bundle generates .next folder containing optimized JavaScript, CSS, and static assets, if applicable, for pages that can be pre-rendered using getStaticProps or getStaticPath. I think we have some getStaticProps. Tree shaking and code splitting to reduce bundle size. Only next public variables are included in the client bundle. Validates your app for production readiness, catching errors like missing dependencies or invalid routes. Produce minified static generation. I think that's what I want to have, right? Prepares route for SSR. Server-side props. To test the production build locally. This simulates how your app will behave on a production server without hot reloading. Okay. So if I want to test it after, I can run the npm build and npm test to check bundle size and optimize if needed. Lazy load images or split large component. Run execute to produce the performance inside. But when you have small CD pipelines or build your Nux and XIV on the same server, it'll only get up to, yeah. Such pre-renders of pages will take a lot of when done on the VPS. So it will only took a lot of resource when building, right? Building, or at least the most resource. But when it's like a normal operating, when it's already built, it would be fine. I think during the testing a few days ago, that is what happened. The build failed and the server just crashes. So I think I will go with the 4 GB option just so that it's safe. Such pre-renders of pages will take a lot of RAM. Yeah, I guess that's what we're gonna do. Hello.
It automatically will restart if it crashes, so you definitely want to be running something like this. There are other tools for this as well. You can just use like systemd, which is built into Linux, to create your own service that automatically restarts on crash. But these are some of the things that you would want to do. Definitely in a future episode, I'm going to talk about more stuff you can do to.
You could also
make sure
build
you're
locally on your
crashing.
machine and push to the VPS, but would recommend to get a server with more RAM. Okay. Thank you. I will consider that. I think the 4 GB is okay. Because it's gonna run the build only for the app, or does it need the database as well? Okay, the 4 GB should be fine. Okay, thank you. But I also want to host like the database there. Is that okay from your experience?
Halo, Agustus tuh jadi mau kan?
Insyaallah.
Ya, gue mungkin dulu ya.
Running well in production, but that's at least a
Boleh,
start. So
boleh.
thank you for your question. Next up, let's get into comments and
Tempat.
corrections. So this first
Rame emang.
comment comes from Chris Clem.
Pas
Says, can't you use SCP
itunya
to
hari
copy your
libur.
public key to your
Ah,
VPS?
okay.
Let's touch on that really quick. Because yes, you can.
libur
So when you're working with a remote server,
internasional, libur di
typically
daerah
you're going to want to
lain.
figure out some way to
Okay.
get files onto that remote server, and SCP, or Secure Copy Protocol, is one way of doing that. So this is actually a command you can run that transfers files either from your local machine to some remote server over SSH, or from some remote server to your local machine. So you can transfer files in both directions, and it works over SSH. So you don't have to open up any other ports. You can just use the same SSH port that you're using to connect to the server to actually transfer files. And so SCP is one way to do it. You can check out this Wikipedia page where it talks about it. I'll also link to the TLDR page that shows you some common ways of running the command. But yes, if you want to get files from your machine to a remote machine, or from
Ini
a
tas
remote
ini berapa
machine to a
liter?
machine, SCP is one way to do it. There are other ways, so things like SFTP,
Berapa ya?
where you can, like,
Kayaknya
putting something in a Git repo and
30-an
running it to
deh.
the server. There's other ways which we'll touch on in future videos, but SCP is
Ya,
definitely.
cukup lah.
All right, so the next thing Chris says is there's also a way to add two-factor authentication using QTP codes as a second form of authentication to the terminal. And Gadar also mentions at work we use SSH keys on a YubiKey and do not store them on our computer. So this is a further way to lock down logging into a VPS over SSH. And I've never done this before, but it seems pretty easy to set up. So
Some way of Docker files of system server use logfile. For example, PSQL by default should use run 100, but also other servers can archive some. I see. Okay. Okay. Yes, probably Postgres. So I think the 4 GB should be okay, because hopefully it's okay.
specifically on Ubuntu, there is this package called libpam Google Authenticator, and you can set this up so that after connecting with your private key over SSH, it will then prompt you for a one-time code, and then you can use the Authenticator app to put that code in. So this is pretty slick. So it's basically adding two-factor auth over SSH. So that's one thing you can do. And then beyond that, what Gadar is mentioning is YubiKey. So if you haven't heard of YubiKey, it's a hardware tool for getting like one-time codes, and it can also store.
Yes,
private
plenty
keys.
enough. Okay.
It plugs
Thank
in
you.
via
Thank you
USB
so much. I
into
was worried that it wasn't
and
enough. But okay, it turns out it's okay.
They
Thank
actually
you.
have some documentation on setting up your YubiKey to have your private keys for SSH. And there's several different ways you can do it. I'll link to these docs here. But they also have their own one-time password way of doing this. So basically, you can have it so that you're connecting with your public-private key like you set up. But then once you're logged in, you'll be prompted, and then you can just tap your YubiKey, which will put in the one-time passcode. And so they have their own PAM module for this.
Yeah,
that you can,
just a build can
or
take
you
up
might have to build it,
memory, but
maybe
you can
Google
also
Play Store
configure
install
it.
but
Got
that'll
it.
work in a similar way to the one we saw for Google
Roger
Authenticator,
that.
but it would let you use your YubiKey to be the one-time passcode as well. So those are really great suggestions, and one additional form of security that you can set up if you want to lock down the server further. Now, Gadar also mentions a thing called fail to ban. And so I didn't talk about that in the previous video, but we are definitely going to talk about it in future videos. And this is a really nice tool for automatically blocking repeated attempts to either like log in or request files from your server. So this is an open source package. You can set it up on a server. And one thing you can do is you can set up a rule that says, if you see multiple failed login attempts from a specific IP address, block that IP address at the firewall level. And one thing that we'll do in a future video is we'll set up fail to ban to block repeated failed requests. So sometimes attackers try to find files on your server by just brute forcing and requesting a bunch of different file names, like trying to find like /admin or something like that. And you can use fail to ban to look at your HTTP request logs, and if it sees a bunch of 404s or it sees specific kinds of requests, you can actually set up fail to ban to ban that IP address from making requests to the server. Now, what's cool about fail to ban is you can also set it up.
Yeah, I'm not see. Yeah. Yeah, I guess I won't even reach like 10K. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think. I don't think I'll reach that high.
Up in a way where it doesn't ban the IP address forever, because you could do something similar to how a website might lock you out from logging in for like 10 minutes. So let's say on a website you type your password wrong 5 times, and then it's like, hey, you're locked out, try again in an hour or whatever else. Fail to ban also supports that. So instead of just completely blocking someone, you can set it up so that if there are a few failed attempts, block it temporarily and then unblock it. But then if you see more and more failed attempts, you can block it permanently. So fail to ban is pretty versatile in what you can do with it, and definitely you should check it out. But we are going to talk about it in a future video. So thank you to Chris Clem and Gadar both for your comments. These next comments come from Nutty Geek and Codemister, and they talk about configuring SSH to use a non-default port. And so in my video last week, I talked about how I like to just leave SSH running on port 22 because it's convenient to not have to specify the port. But they mentioned
Yeah, true. Of
use,
course.
the config file to specify the non-default port. And so let me me show you what that looks like here. So on your local machine in your SSH folder, there's that config file. And if you take a look at it, you can actually add a section for a server. So you can see by default, I have this section in here for connecting to GitHub, and that's how it uses my private key. But I could add another section with my IP address of the server that I'm connecting to. And then there are several options you can specify here. And one of them is port. And so you can specify that some non-standard port. And now whenever you're connecting to this specific IP address over SSH, the SSH agent will look at this file and use the port that you specified here. So you don't have to specify it manually. So that's a really good tip. And then the other thing that CodeMister mentioned is that you can specify a user there too. So this actually, we'll demonstrate this really quick. And so you can say user and then specify the user you want to connect to. So I'm just going to do 22 because I'm not going to change the port that SSH is running on my remote machine. But let me grab this IP address. And what we can do is after we've set this up, now, whenever I need to SSH, I don't have to specify my username. So if I save this config, now I can just do an SSH, specify the IP address. It's going to look in that config, use the port, use the username, anything else you configured inside there.
So it's just
and
like
directly connect. So yeah, these are really good tips from Nutty Geek and CodeMister. And you can also check out the SSH config man page that shows you all of the other things that you can put in that config file as well. Cool. This next comment also comes from CodeMister, and they made a really good point. So they said, I'm surprised this worked. You must have a very restrictive UMask by default. And so they're talking about whenever I created that authorized keys file on the server. And so they give a suggestion for the type of mode that the file should be in whenever you create it. But let me show you what they're talking about. So I'm here on my remote VPS, and if I cd into that .ssh folder, we can do an ls-l and take a look at that authorized keys file. Now, you may not have known this, but this section that you see right here for any file when you're doing an ls-l, this is the mode of the file. And there are a few different sections. There's this section which says, what are the access rights of the owner? And in this case, I can read and write the file.
Read, write.
I have the next three, which are what are the access of the group? In this case, the file's group is the same as the owner. It's a group with my name in it. And then the last three are what can everyone else on the machine do. And so you might have seen this chmod command, and this
Chmod.
changes the mode of any given file. And so if I do 777, this is going to open it up to the world. So let's just do this really quick and then take a look at the mode. Now, if you look at it, now everyone can read, write, and execute. So this isn't good to have because if there are some other users on this machine, they could potentially get access to this file and see and modify it. And like a malicious user could add their own public key in here and then log in as you remotely. So you definitely want to make sure that this has the right permissions. And the permissions, the most restrictive permissions you can use are 600. So if you do 6, that means read and write for the owner, and then everyone else can't read or write that file. So if I do 600, now you can see it has only rewrite privileges. So you want to make sure that it has that permission. And if you're getting some kind of error and you're not able to log in with your SSH key, it's probably because this file doesn't have the right permission. So thank you very much, CodeMister, for mentioning that. And I will direct you to also this chmod calculator. You can find a lot of different versions of this online, but essentially you can change read, write, and execute for owner, group, and public, and it'll show you what the corresponding value would be. So 777 is
Hey.
read, write, execute for all users. But if we go to the same permissions that I just set, and it is read and write only, then it's 600. So you can figure out what your mode wants to be and then specify that from the command line. But thank you very much, CodeMister. That's a great tip. All right, next up are suggestions for next time. And there are quite a few, and this first one comes from Wanes Salam, and they said, excited for this series, would be interested to see server configuration with Caddy. That's coming up next. And Alex Din says, this is my first time. I like the YouTube suggestion. Very clear tutorial, and I like your energy. Thanks, CJ. Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you for commenting. And they said, can you please add to this tutorial how we can run Docker apps in a VPS and use a different domain name for each app, running Nginx as a reverse proxy? I am going to show how to do this in the next video in this series. And this is related because you can actually set up reverse proxies with a thing called Caddy. So Caddy and Nginx are both types of HTTP servers. And they're just like a lot of other things, there's a lot of options. So you could use something like Caddy server. You could use Nginx. I have the most experience with Nginx. I used it for years, but more recently I switched over to Caddy because it's so easy to configure. But you can use something like Nginx. There's also Apache HTTP server. There's also a thing called Trafic. But all of these tools allow you to set up what is called a reverse proxy. So I'm going to do my best to just kind of like diagram really quick what's happening with a reverse proxy. And regardless of if you have apps running inside of Docker, really if you have multiple apps running on the server, some of them might be running in Docker, but those ports are exposed and you might want to set up a reverse proxy. So let me actually just show you a quick little drawing of what that means. So let's say you have here on your VPS, you have an app running and it is running on port 3000. Now let's say you have your firewall set up and you only open port 80 and you only open port 443. Now, when a user comes to your site, let's say like over HTTPS, and let's say you want to serve up the app that's running on port 3000, this is what a reverse proxy can do. And
Oh, really? Which school? High school? Could be...
beyond that, you can also set this up with DNS. So let's say we set up a DNS record for app.example.com, and then we have an A record set that points to the IP address, the public IP. I'm putting a private IP, but let's say you have an A record that points that domain to the public IP address of your server. Now, when a request comes into to this specific domain,
Okay.
it'll come to this server, but then you need some HTTP server running that can redirect.
I think oh, maybe they have like a foreign language class besides English. Depending on your school and major. Because in Indonesia, most high schools is like separated into like social and like social studies and science. But there are also some region that's also have like language or bahasa as part of like the main curriculum. And I think a lot of high schools still have like a mandatory foreign language besides English. So yeah, it's usually like French or German or Spanish or maybe other languages. But yeah, I think
request, and this is what something like Caddy
that specific school yeah, they have maybe some foreign language class.
Server for this specific domain, then route that request to the application running on port 3000, and then send the traffic in that way. And what's nice is you can actually set up multiple of these. So like if you had another app running, let's call this app 2, and it's running on port 5000, you could have another domain, let's say like another example.com. And if you set up the config that says when a request comes to another example.com,
like for example, for me, I took the science major. The only other language that I need to learn is Bahasa Indonesia and the English. Yeah, I don't have in my school at least there's no option for other languages. But I think in some other school, different region, they have different rules on their own. Because from my latest understanding is that the National Ministry of Education only sets like the main huge curriculum, but then for like specific subjects or like an even more deeper subject for like electives, the local or like the Bundesland, not Bundesland, like the province would like have their own set of rules. So I guess yeah, it's really different on each region. My uni was in German, yes. But in Indonesia, I took a German course outside of school.
Another example.com, for instance, would actually have a DNS record pointed to that same IP address. And so this is basically, I'm going to do a better job of explaining this in the next video, but we're going to set this up in the next video. But I encourage you to try it. You can do this with Caddy, you can do this with Nginx, but essentially you can have any number of domains pointed at a server, and then you basically just have an HTTP server sitting right here listening on port 80 and 443 that's ready to forward those requests to different services running on the machine. The other thing is it doesn't even have to be running on a port. You can also set up these tools to statically serve up files. So you could have just a directory called like www.
Alles klar,
have like an index.html inside of there, and you could set it.
Scan
it up so that for one specific domain, when a request comes into this server, just serve up that static file instead of needing an app running on a port. So as a quick and dirty explanation, I think you can figure it out though. You don't need to wait for my video. I think the only difference between me and you is that like I've failed 100 times at trying to set this kind of stuff up. But I believe in you. You can fail too. So try your best. Look through the docs. I confidence that you can set this up. But essentially, if you look in any of the documentation for any of the HTTP servers that I mentioned, they're going to have something on setting up a reverse proxy, and they're going to talk about specific examples on how to do that. So thanks for your suggestions. This will be in the next video. So stay tuned for that. Okay, and then lastly, Belkachik is asking, are you going to cover Cloudflare? I am. So I actually have a domain pointed
Cloudflare.
at my server, and I'm using Cloudflare to do that. Now, Cloudflare is a DNS provider. They have a lot of other services too. But regardless of where you buy your domain, you can actually change the name servers to Cloudflare and then do all of your DNS settings inside of Cloudflare. And so that's what I'm actually doing for this example server that I'm setting up in the series. And they have a really generous free tier. And one of the cool things that you can get for free as well is the distributed denial of service protection. So in the dashboard, after you set up these domains, they actually have a checkbox you can check. And let's say your server is getting a bunch of requests all of a sudden, you can check that box, and now Cloudflare will put a CAPTCHA for people that are trying to get to your website. And you've probably experienced this before. Like you're trying to get to some website and they're like, prove that you're human before I'll let you
Cloudflare
in.
is great,
And that's
yeah.
the kind of
But
service that
definitely,
Cloudflare
I bought the
provides.
domain from Cloudflare, so I think, yeah, setting up
Provide as well.
the
They do have
DDoS
things,
would
but
be
that's just one thing that
easier, right?
which is pretty nice because you literally check a box and then it adds that CAPTCHA. All right, that is all the questions and comments that I'm covering in this video. Thank you for watching. And if you have more questions, let us know in the
Monopole,
comments.
but great service.
Part of making this series is just trying to help people, right? And so
Monopoly, I think.
really do enjoy any good
Great
comments,
service
bad
or
comments,
good beer.
corrections. Like we want all of this stuff to be technically correct. So yeah, anything you have to say, we'd love to hear it. Just let us know down in the comments, especially if you have more questions about the stuff that I talked about here today. I will also mention
Monopoly?
this video is brought to you by Sentry. So Sentry is an app, an error monitoring platform. They will let you know about errors that are happening in production for your app, and you can see a nice
Yeah,
dashboard
integration is
with
even
the
easier
errors that have
then.
occurred,
Yeah,
when they've
okay.
occurred, and how often they've occurred and stuff like that. It's pretty slick. If you want to get 2 months free, use code Tasty Treats. You can also go to sentry.io/syntax. Or relevant to this series, you can also host it yourself. So if you didn't know, Sentry is actually open source, and you can run it on your own server if you want to. So I'll link to this in the
Okay,
description as well.
Roger.
So
I
if you're
think
interested in, trying to
I
run
want
Sentry on your own
to
server,
tomorrow. I
let me
think
know.
I'd
Hey,
like to
this
set
is
up
pretty
the
slick.
VPS.
Alright,
I
that's all I
think
have in this video.
this.
Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week when we continue the series. So see you in the next one.
Okay. I think that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching and tuning in and for the suggestion. Herr oder Frau Wandermaus? I don't know. But thank you very much for the suggestion and the story in Indonesian. I hope I didn't butcher the German, aber ich hoffe, Sie können zurück nach Indonesien. Oder Wechsel. Oder, oh yeah. I don't know. Have a great one as well. Thank you. See you guys tomorrow to another coding every day, or at least procrastinating coding every day until I get the job.